Gary is our current president. We're making this for posterity to record not only what you've accomplished in TCDLA, but I'd like to know about your family history. Tell us a little bit about where you were born, and brothers, sisters, etc. Father, mother.
How much tape do we have? Born June 21, 1951, in Miami, Florida. Mom was Lucille, Dad was Bernie. I was the middle child of 5, 2 older sisters, 2 younger. Raised and educated in Miami, went to junior college there. Had wonderful summers. I was fortunate enough to be raised in the Florida Keys for my summers. Either Isla Morada or Key West were my playground from June through August. It was a great way to grow up.
I am aware that your parents are still alive. Tell us a little bit about what are their ages and how is their health?
Well, they both live with me now. Bernie is 94, and my mom Lucille is 88, and they have become hill country old timers. They live at the ranch with my wife Dee Dee and I.
And of course, when you speak of the ranch, you're talking in Bandera, Texas. Tell us, you graduated from high school where?
North Miami Beach High School, which I say North Miami High School, it no longer exists. It was torn down last year. And if anything will make you feel old, when your high school is torn down because it's too old. I went to a junior college that was built on an Air Force base called Miami-Dade, and then I went to Florida State in 70, 71. That was not 1870, but 1970, 71. And after that, I went to work for the Sarasota Police Department and the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. Worked on a master's degree in criminal justice at the University of South Florida. And then worked for the state attorney's office in Central Florida until I got accepted to law school. Started law school in 1980 at South Texas College of Law. Finished in 27 months, and of course South Texas was in Houston. And if you couldn't make it as a criminal lawyer in Houston then, you couldn't make it anywhere.
What did you go to work by yourself for your private practice when you got out, or?
I worked by myself for the first 6 months. I was really at a cross between what kind of law I wanted to do. At the time, all the very successful, rich lawyers were doing personal injury and medical malpractice, and I thought that I didn't want to be poor. So even though I had a passion for criminal law, I said, Gary, you don't want to do that. But I needed to eat, so I did some court appointments, and then I became hooked and loved it. And never did any other type of law but that.
Who were some of the early mentors in Houston at that period in your life who were in criminal law?
Well, there was a boatload of really great lawyers that were there, but the ones that stood out, I suppose, were Richard Racehorse Haynes. Percy Foreman was legendary and alive at the time that I was starting my practice. And incidentally, Percy and I have the same birthday. I always thought that was something that was interesting. But 6 months out of law school, I was at a seminar where Ed Millett was teaching. And I asked a couple of questions, and I guess he was looking for somebody. And he called me. He said, how would you like to interview for a job? And I said, okay. He had a very good reputation. He had a lot of interesting drug cases that I had been following. And he worked with brother Jerry Goldstein. So when I went to work for Ed, Jerry had a young protege by the name of Robert Hirshhorn. And it happened that Robert and I got to do a lot of things together because he would do things for Jerry, I would do things for Ed. and Ed and Jerry were working together quite a bit.
They are known for their early drug cases. Is that primarily what you were doing with them at that time?
Well, that's what I wanted to do. We had a pretty significant drug practice, and I got to learn it very well working with Ed.
When did you first start becoming interested in DWI practice?
I attended the trial college that is very successful today, put on by TCDLA. And in cross-examining a technical supervisor from HPD, the Houston Police Department, I realized that she ate my lunch. And I said I would never let that happen again, so I decided to study up on the science of breath testing and waited for the next real trial I had with her. And I never ever wanted to be embarrassed like that again, and I was able to turn the tables on her, and it was really quite a funny thing. Research is the answer to many questions. This particular technical supervisor had a master's degree in toxicology from Sam Houston and wrote a master's thesis on the intoxilizer. So, knowing the rules of evidence pretty good, I had watched her in trial with other lawyers, and she refused to recognize any scientist as an authority in the field of breath testing. But in her bibliography, she recognized 10, 15 of them. So when I had her on cross, unbeknownst to her, I had her master's thesis. And I asked her one by one if she recognized this person to be an expert, this person to be an expert, this person to be an expert, and she said no. And then I asked her if she considered herself to be an expert. And she said yes. And she said that was the only expert she recognized. And I said, well, how do you explain this table of authorities? Well, you've recognized all these other experts, and you could have dropped a pin in that room. Everybody knew that I had her in my hand, and I did. And she was forced to back up all the way and say that they were indeed experts, and she was the only one that disagreed with the scientific principles they had espoused in their scientific articles.
When did you first become aware of or associated with the Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Association?
That was through Ed and Jerry. They were very, very involved in TCDLA. Since I was working for Ed, it was just a natural thing for me to get more involved with TCDLA. And the then executive director at the time, John Boston, he and I hit it off, and he gave me some opportunities to begin to speak in rural areas, and I honed my skills in it being a teacher. And I can say, but if it hadn't been for John Boston, I would not be the lawyer that I am today, because he risked his reputation letting me loose on the public speaking.
We'll come back to the legal end of it in a minute, but I want to get in a little bit into your personal life, because I'm familiar with a lot of your hobbies and excuse me, things you like to do. You're currently married, of course. Tell us a little bit about Dee Dee and how you all met and what your current, I know you all are living on the ranch. Tell us a little bit about that.
Dee Dee is the center of my life. Started out as a secretary for me many, many years ago. I guess we've known each other for close to 30 years now. She had formerly worked for Jerry, worked for Robert Hirshhorn. And she went and worked for Haynes, for Dan Cogdale, who was working with Haynes. And after she left Dan's office, they had a shakeup over there. I hired her, and she was the best thing that ever happened to my practice, because she was so organized and had skills that she had learned by working in Jerry Goldstein's office and Haynes' office. It was a great deal. And we had a great relationship for 4 or 5 years, and she went off to go do different things. She got married, stayed married for a while, and then she decided she wanted to come back to work, and she did. And while working for me, after she became single again, we had an epiphany where we realized that we actually liked each other outside of work too. Her love is for horses, and my love at the time was aviating, and she said she wanted to go live a cowgirl's life. So I sold the airplanes and sold the house in Kima and moved to Bandera, and we chased her dream for a while. That's what we've been doing.
I'm very well aware of your history in aviation and your love for the aircraft. How did you get started in that? What motivated you to become a pilot?
Always wanted to do aviation. My father was a flyer in World War II. He flew B-25s. One of the things I wanted to do was to also fly B-25s. And I actually got a chance to do that with the Confederate Air Force, now the Commemorative Air Force. I suppose back in the maybe 2000, 2001, I was in charge of a World War II B-25, and I took care of it for 3 years for the museum.
The majority of your planes have been somewhat military related, have they not?
Well, I wouldn't say the majority of them, maybe half. I mean, I've had a Pitts, which is an aerobatic stunt plane. I had a V-tail Bonanza, and I had a Baron, which is a twin-engine civilian aircraft, the Bonanza civilian aircraft. And then I had a twin-engine jet fighter called a Casa, a North American T-28, and I had a Vietnam Air observation aircraft called it's a Cessna 337. It was called an O2. And then I had an 086, which was a used 500 helicopter. It was a scout ship used in Vietnam.
And what ratings do you possess?
Too many.
And they are?
Well, I was a flight instructor, single engine, multi-engine, instrument, seaplane. I'm not an instructor in helicopters, but I certainly loved them. That was where my passion was until I moved out of aviation into horses.
So you can safely say that Dee Dee was the motivating factor to sell the Air Force and get into the ranching business.
It was by default, Manny. There's only so many hours in the day, and you just can't do it all. And for me to devote my time to the horses, it meant that the airplanes sat in the hangar. They can be very expensive things to just lock up.
I've known you obviously many years. I was with you and around you during this transition period. One of the things that I am aware of is that you don't do anything halfway. You're very driven, and you certainly took to the horses with that same enthusiasm. When you first got with Dee Dee and decided on the ranch, did you have much riding experience?
I didn't know one end of the horse from another. What side to get on when you did climb on. Whether it was safe to climb on. It was 9 years ago, but there's been a heck of a transition. And I didn't know a lot about the Old West characters, but I now know a lot about them. I speak Sioux to a degree, and not actually fluent, but I can get by. And I do Wild West shows. That's William Frederick Cody Buffalo Bill. And this past year, the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo actually gave me a Wild West show to do for them. And I've done shows now in Bandera for 4 or 5 years. And prior to that, I was doing them in Sheridan, Wyoming. And in the Cody Stampede last year, we were in there with a float with our stagecoach, the Deadwood stage, and took 3 first places.
Well, I know you've also done a lot of horse backpacking. You've gone to the Black Hills in South Dakota.
With you?
That's true. And with the Buffalo Roundup. You are a prominent member and supporter, and I actually have joined it because of you, the Cowboy Mattock Shooters Association. Tell us a little bit about that, and it's got to be a thrill to be ranked in that as you are as a shooter.
It is the most fun you can have with your boots on. It's similar to barrel racing, but different. A rider gets on his horse or her horse. You go through a different course. There's 64 different courses, and for time, you go from start to finish. But in between start and finish, you've got to shoot 10 balloons with either 2 6-shooters that have 5 rounds in each gun, or a 6-shooter with 5 rounds, and then a Winchester with 5 rounds. And it's a hoot. It's the fastest growing horse sport in the country today. And Dee Dee and I travel all over the country doing it. You start as a 1, and then you end up as a 6, and I'm now shooting as a level 5.
So it's a timed event that...
Fastest one through the course wins, but if you miss a balloon, then you add time.
And that's currently really what occupies a lot of your time, I assume, besides the practice of law. And I know that you spend a considerable amount of time law. You've been president this last year of Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Association. Saturday of this week will be the end of your presidency, and you will become our newest past president. But let's go back to Houston a little bit. How did you? You've had some really great people that you've associated with in there that you mentioned, Gerald, Ed. How did you meet up with Troy McKinney?
Moot court round where I was asked to judge him at a championship, and I sat there with the judge's bench with Stan Snyder, who became his partner. I think it was Ted Post, now a congressman. We judged Troy, and he was just so confident and so clear with his arguments that we all determined that he was brilliant. So much so that Stanley asked him to come to his office that following Saturday and hired him. I've been friends with Stanley since I started my law career, and with Troy soon after he was hired by Stan.
And you and Troy have actually done a lot of practice together. I know that you tried a lot of cases with him, but you also have published a DWI manual that you and he currently have on the
Texas
market.
Drunk Driving Law, we're in our 5th edition. It's a 2-volume treatise on how to try a DWI case in Texas.
You've got a really great history and career in the DWI practice. What got you interested in that?
Well, drugs were very interesting. That's where the constitutional fight was. But it was also difficult to be effective and be aggressive without the government getting mad at you. I had a case that 2 clients out of Florida came to hire me that they had been busted in a raid by DEA in a farm outside of Waco. And they told the agent in charge that they could give him a Mr. Big if they were let go. The agent said, BS. Nobody could be that big, and they gave him a name and said, run it in your database. He did, and he came back and he said, you're released. Have a lawyer with you and come back next week. So I got the call. I don't know how they found me, or I don't remember how they found me, but I cut a deal that they could avoid prosecution if they cooperated, and that was what they chose to do. I wasn't real happy about representing somebody that wanted to point fingers at their friends and other people, but that was their choice, and they had certain rights, and I was there to go ahead and help them and defend those rights. And during that case, I received a substantial fee that I reported, that the DEA had reported to the assistant U.S. attorney that I had not done that. And much to my surprise, I got a call from a court reporter one day that said, "How do you spell this name, and this name?" And I said, "Well, this is how you do it, but why are you calling for me?" This was after I had to testify in Pensacola at the trial where my clients testified. I testified because one of the defense lawyers tried to punish me for representing what he perceived to be snitches, wanted to see if he could get my fee seized. So that's how my testimony came to be taken, but it didn't explain why somebody would want it. So I asked who wanted it. The reporter said, the assistant U.S. attorney, and I called the prosecutor and said, "Why do you want my testimony?" And he said, "Because you're a target." And I said, "That's a bad thing." And I wound up figuring what it could be, that they had looked for my 8300 form and they couldn't find it, or they were negligent in looking for it, and they were going to go ahead and indict me for perjury. Well, knowing that I had the 8300 form, knowing that I had told the truth, I had hired John Ackerman, who was one of my mentors, and I officed with John for about 10 years. So John, here's this. We have the postal receipt that has been received by the IRS. Can you kill this? And he did. If we had got a call from the court reporter, I probably would have been arrested. So what I learned from that was, if you're good at what you do, and you're aggressive, no matter how honest, how much integrity you have, that it can come back to bite you. And drug cases was a area that the courts were beginning to suspend liberties because it was unpopular, not because it was right. So it just so happened that was the time that I started to develop an interest in DWI, where all the money was clean. You never had to worry about it, never had to worry about getting your fee forfeited. And people that get accused of DWI, some are guilty, but many of them are not. And I came to realize that more than any other offense, there were more innocent people wrongly charged with that type of offense than any other type of offense. And I also realized that the people were good, and that they were working, and they had jobs, and they could pay their lawyer.
Well, at or about that same time, you became associated with, and I'm not exactly sure the timing on it, but the National DWI College came in existence, and you were a founding member or starter up in that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was a great opportunity. It's a good lawyer out of Atlanta, Georgia, Bubba Head, that had this idea, kind of similar to the beginnings of NACDL, that there needed to be a need for a DWI bar, because DWI was becoming more complex with blood cases, with standardized field sobriety tests that were supposed to be promulgated on scientific principles, which they were not, the science behind breath, and that we needed to have a group that was capable of filtering out what was true, what was not. So Bubba invited 12 of us to Chicago to talk about putting together a training college for it, and I liked it, got involved in it, and now that organization is 1,000 strong. They've got a terrific listserv, and some of the brightest lawyers in America belong to it. I'm very proud to be part of it.
You were a past dean.
Past dean.
You were in the initial, I'm not sure who was the first dean, but you were one of the early deans of the college.
Yeah, Larry Taylor out of California was the first dean who did something. We had an honorary dean before that. His name was Bill, and I can't think of his last name right now. But it was for a year. There were 12 regents that worked that college, make the decisions to function properly for the benefit of all the membership.
I recall you were, at one point in that time, you were interviewed on Fox News Network by Bill O'Reilly. You were the dean of the college at that point, I believe.
Yeah, that was not my best interview at the time, but I learned a lot from it.
What occurred that made Fox News want to interview you?
As I recall that case, it's in New Jersey. Police arrested a man and then cut him loose. And when they cut him loose, they gave him his car back, and he went out and got involved in an accident where somebody was hurt.
Prior to your involvement in the National College, you also were known for having directed and co-chaired, in fact there were 13 of them, seminars that were held throughout the Caribbean, Costa Rica. Troy was involved in that, as were some of the rest of us. But was that your first broad-based experience in wanting to teach DWI law?
DWI, no. That was a great time, those Lone Star seminars with you. And that was a great chapter in my life. We did 12 summers. We did Grand Caymans, we did Nevis St. Kitts, we did Costa Rica, and we had a great following. And the format was such that you just came home with family, not just lawyers. You went out with lawyers, you came back with family. And I hope someday we'll do that again. But my DWI training actually began with John Boston, when I would go out for the Criminal Lawyers Defense Project and teach in rural areas. And the more I taught, the more I figured out that there was a better way to skin a cat. As I created new motions, I would share them. The more I shared, the more I had a need to do more research. The more research I did, the more I wrote, the more I would submit for publication in The Voice. The Voice, by the way, is such a great magazine now with Greg Westfall. He's done a tremendous job. He is an unsung hero of this association.
Well, certainly TCDLA has run with the ball, and you're, I think, probably directly responsible for it, run with the ball on DWI seminars. I would suggest that perhaps it's our strongest one of the stronger educational pursuits that you've encouraged with TCDLA. Tell us a little bit about this past year, your involvement with TCDLA. I know it's been very time consuming, but tell us a little bit about your feelings of what you've been able to accomplish in your pride and where you see TCDLA going.
I want to start a year before that. Because I didn't get to be president-elect or president the normal way. I actually said that I wanted to be voted president-elect because if the membership accepted me in that officer's position, then the next thing you do is you move into the presidency. And I had some ideas about how I thought the organization would be better, that we needed a change of feeling, a change of direction. And a majority of the membership agreed, and I was voted as the president-elect by majority, and here I am today. I'm happy to report that we have the highest attended Rusty Duncan today. Happy to report that we're about to get a new listserv that's more friendly. That we were able to go ahead and bring psychodrama to Texas with John Ackerman. Just an outstanding teaching tool. That we have been instrumental working with the National College for DUI Defense, with MSC in San Antonio. Sorry, I was being in New Orleans. And that is the premier scientific seminar for lawyers in the country that practice DWI work. And then with lawyers like you and with Troy McKinney and Doug Murphy, we've gone to Dallas and to El Paso to do seminars for public defenders, to teach them how to be better at representing DWI defendants. By the way, if you can try a DWI case, you can try any case. There's just so much science and so much thinking and strategy that goes into it. You can try that case, you can try any case. They're harder than most other cases.
What's really become so interesting in the DWI field is, to me, is the forensic science end of it. I know you have attended Axiom Labs and you're certified in gas chromatography, but this has got to put you a long way ahead of the average prosecutor in understanding the science behind DWI blood and breath.
You know, Benny, for many years, if prosecutors said, we have a blood test case, we have a blood test result, the lawyers would just fold. The defense lawyers didn't know that they needed to challenge this evidence because they just didn't understand it. You just accepted that blood is something that's used as a medium in science, and it's used in medicine. But the truth is, the forensic people that do the testing for police work are terrible. And they make mistakes all the time. So what we're doing right now is we're trying to enlighten the defense bar, and we've done a great job doing it, as to what the problems that are inherent in gas chromatography, so that they will be able to make the discovery requests and determine whether or not they have a good blood estimate or not. I mean, it's a very exciting area to be in right now, and if you know it well, you're going to make a lot of money in it.
Well, obviously you know it well. You yourself, your law partner Doug Murphy, and Troy McKinney are three of the only four board-certified DWI lawyers in Texas, Mimi Coffey being the fourth. It's obviously not easy, and I think there's, only 100 in the United States that are certified, or approximately that amount?
No, a lot less.
Is it less than that? So, you know, you're in a very rare group, very specialized group. It's something to be proud of, what you've accomplished on that.
Actually, that certification comes from the National College for DUI Defense, which I was a founder of, that it sought certification from the American Bar Association, and the American Bar Association blessed its certification. Now, what you didn't know is I was the dean at the time that we made the push to get the certification.
That doesn't surprise me. You have accomplishments in mind, and you usually succeed at them. Today being a prime example of the things, you created a new award today, the Justice Award, which was presented today.
Spirit of Justice Award.
Spirit of Justice Award, and it was very apropos of the person that you presented it to, John Rayleigh.
And Nina
Morrison.
Cynthia Orr, and Brother Goldstein.
And all of them well-deserving of it.
Yeah.
What do you see?
Wait, before I forget, an accomplishment was we now own our own home office. That the chairman of the Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Educational Institute, John Young, has done yeoman's work with his committee, and they paid off the home office, and we have now, as of this morning, signed paperwork to transfer the title from LEI to LA, and we're now the home owners. How cool is that?
That's fantastic. Another thing that's going to leave as a legacy is you have worked miracles with the Court of Criminal Appeals on our grant money and Judge Barbara Herbie. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with her and how that has come about, that it's assisted TCDLA in our receipt of grant money.
Judge Hervey is the judge who administers our grant of $1.2 million. Of course, that money comes from the legislature, and that money is used for us to educate lawyers. I mean, the mission for TCDLA is to educate, and then educate some more. And I suppose that's one of the things that has always attracted me to this organization, because the more lawyers that we can train, the higher we raise the bar of representation, and the more we give back to the citizens. Judge Hervey is a good person. She wants lawyers to be smarter, to render effective assistance of counsel. She would prefer for everybody to have a fair trial the first time. And she's a good person to work with. I've enjoyed it.
You know, that you brought up something that I have friends in other professions, and they are aware of the number of CLE programs and hours that we give. And I've heard some of them say, well, why do you want to tell your secrets to another lawyer about how you try a case? But I think as lawyers, we feel obligated to do that.
You know, Benny, this organization has been very good to me. They have trained me, and the least I can do is give back. So I have an idea, and the first thing I'm going to do is toss it back and say, make it better. One of the beautiful things that I've been exposed to is voir dire. I had some really good people that helped me there, John Ackerman, Kat Bennett, and Robert Hirschhorn, who at one time was my law partner. And they rewired the way that I thought about voir dire, and it's made me very effective in the courtroom, but also a very effective teacher. And I've now decided that I need to start teaching something that I call the 3 rules of jury decision making, and talk about presumption of innocence, beyond a reasonable doubt, and burden of proof, but not as lawyers, but as lay people. And I'm finding that that is being a very effective tool in the courtroom. And it's very, very effective in teaching others. And I think we're going to change the way lawyers pick juries on the basis of this new idea. It may not even be a new idea. It just means that I just thought of something somebody else did many, many years ago, but it's kind of exciting for me.
Well, I've heard you say many times that you feel like cases are won in voir dire.
They're lost in voir dire. They're not over until the jury decides at the end, but you can lose them instantly in voir dire and never be able to get it back. Voir dire, in my opinion, is the most important part of the case.
Did you pick up your cross-examination skills just through trial and error, or have you likewise concentrated on that for a significant part of your career?
I just watched, experimented, went to seminars where other lawyers like Terry McCarthy were willing to share with me their techniques. I listen, I watch, and I think about it and decide what works for me.
One of the things that I heard that you brought up this week, and it certainly makes sense, is the inclusion of the public defender within our organization. What do you see as the immediate or the near future that we need to do to be more inclusive of the public defender?
I think that they are already included. Our goal is to help them be more effective. That they are treated differently by their bosses, the county commissioners, by the state. So I think what we need to do is, because we have this large association, we need to put our voice behind their needs. And that's where I think we need to go.
You know, you and I have talked about it a lot, and one of the things that really impresses me is you are a history buff. I think not only a military history buff, but a Western history buff. I've heard you talk about and make the comparison that we are soldiers in the trenches fighting for the Constitution. What would you tell the new young lawyer coming out of law school that wanted to practice criminal law? What would you probably be the first thing you'd want to impress upon them?
That you impress upon them.
Or at least get them to realize the importance of it.
You know, if you don't appreciate history, you're doomed to repeat it. And there were an awful lot of people that died so that we might have these rights that separates our government from all the other governments in the world. And our government is different than the bureaucracy that runs agencies. Our government is we the people. And the difficulty I think that young lawyers have, and even old lawyers, is we forget. The power really is in the people, and we as lawyers get a chance to try to rejuvenate love of country and love to do the right thing with jurors. I think young lawyers need to read about history, and so they can relate to a spirit. We talked about a spirit of justice, so they understand how to communicate that spirit to do the right thing.
It started, it may have started earlier than last year, but you've certainly been a promoter of it for this year, is the reading of the Declaration of Independence on the 4th of July or the 3rd of July, the day before. It seems to be growing, not only in Texas, but I understand now that we have actually spread this concept to, I think, 8 or 9 other states that are going to take it up this year.
Many of the credit for that goes to Houston lawyer Bob Fickman, or Rob Fickman, who originated the thought 3 years ago in Harris County, and now they routinely get 100 lawyers to turn out and read the Declaration. Each lawyer reading the line, listening to the reading with the different voices, the different inflections, is powerful. Doing it at the courthouse where jurors can hear is powerful. It sends a reminder to them that it's we the people. And I think it's good that we remind jurors and judges and people that frequent the courthouse just what this country is all about. And we do have unalienable rights, and that's something worth not just dying for, but preserving.
Well, it certainly has taken foothold and is growing.
Well, it's a fabulous idea, and I hope that Rob's idea takes off more. We had over 20 courthouses represented last year in this state, and I suspect we'll have double that number here, and it'll be nice to see how many more states we get. As you said, he's got 8 states that are now confirmed that they're going to participate.
Well, you're less than 48 hours away from the termination of your presidency. It's been a very long year. I know you put a lot of time in on it. You've been blessed with having a great staff at TCDLA to work with. Joseph and his staff, I'm sure, have been tremendous, and you have worked with them exceptionally well. I know they're very proud to have been associated with us. What are you going to do with all your extra time starting next week?
Well, I would not be the president that I was allowed to become without the leadership of Joseph Martinez and Melissa Shank. They are spectacular assets to this association. And it hasn't been 1 year, it's been 2 years, and it's been a long 2 years, but it's been like the blink of an eye. I had a lot of discretionary time to teach and to write that I've had to give up in order to fulfill my duties as president-elected president. And I want to get back to teaching and writing and playing with my horses and my dogs.
Well, this is your opportunity in concluding this. Do you have anything you wish for posterity, to our future TCDLA people who look back at this, to know about Gary Trichter, or words of advice that you could give them?
Concluding remarks. Yeah, read the Declaration of Independence, read the Bill of Rights, and think about why the signers of the Declaration would risk their lives to put their name on a piece of paper. What was so special about it that they would agree together to stand together at the risk of death? What was so important? And if it was so important then, why is it important now? And I suppose to young lawyers, the question that I'd ask is, if the founders were to come back today and they were looking for somebody else to sign off on that document, would they ask you to sign off on it? And if they would not ask you, I'd be asking myself, why? How come? And then the second part of that question is, if they did ask you, would you sign off on it? Would you put yourself at risk? If you can say yes to both of those questions, then you have every right to practice criminal law. And if you can't, then you might want to think about doing something else.
Well, Gary, on behalf of myself and many other people, I want to thank you.
Thank you, Brother Benny.
It's been a pleasure.
As they say in the cartoons, Looney Tunes, that's all, folks.